Before the Flood, The Fall of Atlantis, by Matson. Chapter 6, Blood and Blue Flame. The colossal arena of Ring 7 rose like the gaping maw of some primordial beast, awakened from the abyss by the forbidden rites of the Watchers, its massive concentric tiers of weathered limestone, crammed shoulder to shoulder, with over 30,000 frenzied spectators, whose collective bloodlust hung in the air like a choking, tangible fog. The fighting floor sprawled vast and unforgiving, beneath a sky already bruised and darkened by thick plumes of torch smoke and the drifting, mind-altering vapors that escaped from the Pharmacia academies in the neighboring rings. Sand the color of long-dried blood shifted treacherously under every step, churned by the preliminary exhibition matches into a heavy clinging paste that sucked at Leon's sandals and stained the lower edges of his simple woolen tunic a deeper, ominous crimson. The atmosphere pressed down oppressively, a thick miasma woven from the sharp reek of unwashed warrior sweat. The cloying sweetness of expensive incense burned in enormous braziers to mask the inevitable stench of death, the sour notes of spilled watered wine, and the ever-present metallic tang of old blood that had soaked into the very grains of the arena over countless culls. Banners of coarse dyed wool snapped and cracked violently in the hot, dry winds funneled inward from the ring's high outer marble walls. Deep crimson banners representing the lifeblood perpetually demanded by the three orders, stark black ones symbolizing the encroaching spiritual night that threatened to swallow the world entire. Vendors wove through the upper tiers like opportunistic scavengers, their voices hoarse as they hawked roasted meats, dripping with fat from bronze spits, cups of watered wine, and cheap clay amulets crudely inscribed with invocations to minor watchers, promising luck or protection that every seasoned fighter knew were worthless against the true, corrupting gifts of Moch, Guff, and Ruach. The roar of the crowd was not mere noise, but a living, pulsating beast all its own, a ceaseless thunder that vibrated through Leon's chest, rattled his teeth, and drowned out everything except the most insistent whispers of his own soul. It fed the growing violence of this antediluvian age, turning horror into sacrament and preparing humanity for the greater judgments to come. Leon marched at the head of his team of 5, his bronze shield strapped firmly to his left forearm, the short, stabbing spear balanced with practiced ease in his right hand. At 24 years old, he cut an imposing yet still largely unmarred figure, even among the tall, hardy men of Tanaju bloodline. Broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed from years of labor in rocky olive groves and brutal training. Dark hair bound back by a simple leather cord, stormy gray-green eyes holding a quiet, intense focus that made lesser men pause. A single faint scar traced the line of his jaw from a boyhood skirmish, but otherwise his body remained clean, untouched by the grotesque mutations already claiming so many older warriors of the Order of Guff. Not yet. To his right loomed Stelios, the 34-year-old unbreakable tank, a human fortress with a barrel chest, arms thick as young tree trunks, a thick black beard braided with iron rings, and ritual scars across his torso that pulsed with faint inner light when his blood rose. His massive bronze-banded club rested casually on one massive shoulder like a felled sapling. On Leon's left, Lysandros the scholar moved with lean, precise economy at 29, his pale skin speaking of long hours among dusty library scrolls rather than under the merciless sun, a satchel heavy with delicate glass vials and dried herbs slung at his hip, sharp eyes already scanning opponents for weaknesses. Pyrrhon, the youngest at 26, burned with reckless energy, his wild mane of red hair catching every flicker of torchlight like living flame. Burn scars mapping his forearms and neck as badges of his growing mastery over pyromancy. Boreas completed the formation, 31 and tall and wiry with pale gray eyes and wind-tousled hair, moving with an unnatural, almost detached lightness that marked the touch of aromancy upon him. They were one of 8 teams, 40 hardened bloodline fighters in total, arrayed across the blood-stained vastness of the arena floor. At the far northern end, dominating everything, rose the throne of King Gorgathon, the reigning Nephilim giant of Ring 7. The colossal figure, easily 9 feet or taller, reclined upon a monstrous seat carved from fused earth and wind-sculpted marble, his body a living nightmare of visible corruption. Skin and bone were slowly petrifying, turning to brittle stone that creaked audibly with even the slightest shift of his massive frame. His eyes, sunk deep into a face half transformed by his own power, gleamed with cold, predatory anticipation for the fresh meat delivered to his domain. High above, in the opulent luxury boxes reserved for the most honored or feared guests, the Egyptian Nephilim giants lounged like living gods come to witness sport. Their forms towered 12 to 14 feet, each a grotesque masterpiece of twisted covenant power. Crystal growths sparking stolen lightning, living malachite scales shimmering, multifaceted insect eyes whirring, water rippling beneath seductive skin, crocodile jaws clacking. Their booming, cruel laughter rolled down across the tiers like thunder from a profane storm, mocking the entire bloody spectacle of Poseidon's runt empire. One of them, Horus the far-seeing, with his golden eye patch and ruined feathered stumps, leaned forward, his many-lensed gaze fixing briefly and unnervingly on Leon. The winged dog of Tanaju had been spoken of in their distant hall of eternal dawn. The name had already spread like fire on dry grass. Deep within the hidden dimensions of Leon's blood, Kion, the stubborn, nameless watcher of the Order of Guff, stirred with eager, hungry anticipation. They cheer your name already, pup. Unleash me fully and without restraint. Let the entire island worship the power you are destined to become. Rule them. Leon's calloused fingers brushed subtly against the small olive branch token tucked securely against his heart beneath his tunic. The unripe branch, snapped clean from a tree in the groves of Calliste during the night of his divine vision, still carried a faint, living warmth that defied the oppressive dread of Atlantis. Beside it rested the folded remnant note slipped to him by the faithful child in the shadows. The faithful remnant sees you, winged one of Tanaju. Enoch walked with God and was taken. Walk likewise in obedience. Judgment comes. The words steadied him. Not my will, creator of all things visible and invisible, he prayed silently, the plea rising from the depths of his soul. But yours alone. Even if this body fails exactly as the orders and the watchers have foretold, strengthen me against the hunger. A priest, clad in flowing robes, the color of fresh blood, ascended a raised dais at the arena's edge, his voice amplified by hidden Mancy workings, to boom like divine proclamation across every tier. Warriors drawn from the proud bloodlines of the world, today the first culling commences in Ring 7 of glorious Atlantis. 8 teams of 5 enter this sacred ground. Only the strongest, the most favored by the Watchers, will advance to face greater trials and the reigning king himself. All matches are to the death. Let the gifts of the 3 orders, Pharmacia of the mind, altering of the body, Mancy of the spirit, prove their supremacy. For the eternal glory of the Watchers and the insatiable hunger of Ra'av, let flesh once more demonstrate its inevitable, glorious failure. The great horn, a polished conch shell the size of a grown man's torso, sounded its deep, mournful blast, the signal for slaughter. Chaos erupted across the sand like a cataclysm. 40 warriors charged forward in a roaring, undisciplined wave of bronze, muscle, rage, and twisted supernatural power. Leon's team moved as one cohesive unit, formation tight and disciplined amid the madness. Opponents converged on them from multiple directions, brutish, altering warriors bloated with extra-muscular limbs and grotesque mutations that warped their bodies into parodies of humanity. Sly Pharmacia adepts flinging clouds of shimmering, deadly powders. Wild Mancy users already channeling crackling arcs of lightning, bursts of flame, and howling gusts of wind in uncontrolled displays of raw force. Stelios charged ahead like a living battering ram, invoking his own unnamed watcher from the Order of Guff, with a guttural roar that seemed to shake the very air. His skin transformed in an instant, hardening into living bronze armor that gleamed dully beneath the harsh sunlight and torchlight. The massive shield on his arm absorbed a devastating barrage of blows, spears splintering against it with sharp cracks, clubs rebounding with ringing impacts that numbed the hands of their wielders. His iron-studded club swept in wide, crushing arcs, felling two altering foes in the opening seconds. Bones snapped with sickening wet cracks that carried across the sand. One man's arm bent backward at an unnatural angle, dangling uselessly, while the other's skull caved inward, gray matter and blood spilling onto the thirsty grains. "Come on, you whelps of corruption and weakness," Stelios bellowed, his voice like grinding millstones. His ritual scars across his chest pulsed with inner light. Yet even in the heat of battle, Leon, fighting at his side, caught the ominous, subtle creak of bones beneath the bronze, the tank's body already growing heavier, more brittle with each invocation. The price of power was never absent. To Stelios's flank, Lysandros operated with the cold, intellectual precision of a true Pharmacia master of the Order of Moach. He moved like a ghost through the chaos, pinching precise measures of shimmering powders and dried herbs from his satchel and flinging them with flicks of his slender wrists. The air around a charging four-armed brute's legs thickened suddenly into sluggish molasses, turning what should have been powerful, unstoppable strides into drunken, stumbling lurches that left the warrior vulnerable. Another targeted pinch accelerated rust on a rival's bronze spearhead, causing the metal to flake and snap uselessly mid-thrust. A carefully placed contact poison brushed an enemy Pharmacia user's exposed forearm. The man's scream rose shrill above the din, as his flesh immediately began to bubble and rot from within, black veins spreading outward like cracks racing across dry desert earth. Lysandros' sharp eyes remained focused and calculating, but his lips moved almost imperceptibly, muttering quiet responses to voices and shadows that existed only in his fracturing mind. Not real. The illusions lie again. Hold to the path. The scholar's brilliant intellect, honed by secret knowledge, was already paying the slow, insidious cost of his order. Pyrrhon threw himself into the fray with the hot-tempered, reckless abandon that defined him. Flames erupted from his hands in roaring, hungry fireballs that engulfed two advancing, altering warriors completely. Their cloaks and wild hair ignited instantly, transforming proud fighters into screaming, flailing human torches that staggered blindly before collapsing in smoldering heaps of charred flesh and bone. The heat radiating from his workings was so intense that patches of the arena sand vitrified into glassy, razor-sharp shards that cut into the feet of anyone nearby. "Burn! All of you burn for the glory of the flame!" Pyrrhon crowed, his laughter wild and fierce, even as fresh black charring crept further along the edges of his existing burn scars. Sweat beaded on his skin, only to sizzle and evaporate on contact with the unnatural heat pouring off him. Every invocation devoured another fragment of his own life force, but the competitive fire in his eyes burned brighter than ever. Boreas wove a calm, calculating web of control through the heart of the storm. Tall and wiry, he commanded the winds with subtle, precise gestures of his long fingers. Razor-sharp cutting gusts sliced open arteries and knocked warriors off their feet. A shimmering protective shield of compressed air deflected an entire volley of thrown daggers and javelins, sending the projectiles spinning harmlessly away into the screaming crowd. At one critical moment, he lifted the massive Stelios momentarily off the sand with a focused updraft, allowing the tank to deliver a devastating downward smash with his club. Yet each working exacted its toll. Boreas's breath grew labored, and a harsh cough racked his frame, leaving faint traces of dark, metallic blood on his lips when he believed no one watched. His own lungs were slowly poisoning themselves against the normal air of the world. Leon fought at the heart of their formation, his raw physical skill and inherited guff strength carrying him through the initial frenzy. His spear thrust true, felling one opponent after another, the bronze point driving deep. But the power sleeping in his blood demanded release. Kion pressed hard against the veil separating dimensions. Now, pup, show them what true altering can be. A particularly monstrous, altering brute with 4 extra whip-like muscular arms charged directly at Leon, the additional limbs flailing like living weapons. Leon twisted inside the reach with practiced agility, driving his spear deep into the man's thigh and pinning him momentarily to the sand. The warrior howled in agony, clutching desperately at the shaft, wide eyes filled with sudden animal terror and a fleeting remnant of humanity. For a single agonizing heartbeat, Leon hesitated. There was still a man behind those eyes, perhaps a son or father from some distant shore. But the thunderous, ecstatic roar of 30,000 spectators crushed any whisper of mercy. He wrenched the spear free with a twist and drove it home into the heart. That hesitation nearly proved fatal. A Pharmacia adept seized the opening, flinging a dense cloud of poisonous powder directly toward Leon's face. The grains glittered malevolently in the air. It was time. Leon invoked Kion with full, public intent for the first time since arriving in Atlantis. Bright blue flames roared suddenly to life along his forearms, shoulders, and upper arms. They coated his skin without consuming it, granting surges of superhuman strength that made his muscles sing, blinding speed that turned the world around him into a slower blur, and radiant heat that seared the air itself. With a focused thrust of will, he hurled a condensed projectile of pure blue fire that streaked across the sand like a comet and exploded against the Pharmacia user's chest. Armor melted instantly, flesh cooked in a burst of superheated vapor. The man collapsed, writhing and screaming as his body was consumed from within. Then the wings manifested in all their terrible glory, massive constructs of living blue flame sprouting powerfully from his shoulders. They beat once, twice, generating lift that carried Leon soaring high above the chaotic melee. The crowd's roar swelled to a deafening fever pitch that shook the very stones of the arena. "The winged dog of Tanaju," they chanted in unified ecstasy. "Kion's champion, the blue flame rises, glory to the new king." From his aerial vantage, Leon surveyed the battlefield, a vision straight from the nightmares of the faithful remnant. He descended like divine judgment incarnate, his flaming fists shattering shields and driving through bronze armor into yielding flesh with bursts of searing heat. Condensed projectiles lanced outward, melting defenses and igniting new horrors. The wings granted him impossible leaps and aerial dominance, allowing him to dictate the flow of combat from above. The power flooding his veins felt alive, intoxicating, almost divine. Kion's voice slithered deeper into his thoughts, seductive and insistent. "This is only the beginning, pup. Rule this ring. Claim the throne in a single day. They already worship you as a living god. Why cling to the commands of a distant, silent creator when true dominion and glory wait in your grasp?" Leon gripped the olive branch token tighter beneath his tunic as he landed amid a fresh cluster of foes. The pure, quiet warmth of the token pushed back against the rising hunger, like cool water on fevered skin. "For the Creator," he whispered fiercely through gritted teeth, even as a fresh, glowing scar traced further up his left arm, luminous tributaries spreading like veins of holy fire. Or perhaps something more dangerous. The cost of the Covenant had truly begun. The battle raged on with unrelenting savagery. Stelios absorbed a thunderous overhead blow from another four-armed altering giant, his bronze skin denting deeply but holding firm. He countered with a sweeping club strike that shattered multiple extra limbs in sprays of blood and bone fragments. Lysandros darted in to slap a quick healing salve onto a deep gash in Pyrrhon's side, even while flinging more powders that created battlefield illusions of shifting shadows, causing enemies to strike at phantoms and leave themselves open. Pyrrhon's walls of roaring flame cleared entire groups of attackers, but a backlash licked across his own forearm, charring the skin blacker and deeper. Boreas's controlled whirlwinds amplified the fires into towering infernos, while simultaneously suffocating isolated clusters of Mancy users, forcing them to their knees, clawing at their throats. His cough grew more frequent and wet. Leon took a shallow but painful gash across his ribs from a jagged, rusted blade that slipped past the edge of his shield. White-hot agony flared, but the blue flames encasing his arms cauterized the wound almost instantly, turning the pain itself into a weaponized wave of heat that drove back the attacker. Another foe, a geomancy practitioner, slammed a fist into the sand and opened a yawning pit directly beneath Leon's feet. The wings flared powerfully, carrying him clear in a graceful arc. In retaliation, Leon hurled a superheated blue projectile that turned a wide swath of sand into molten glass, trapping the geomancer's legs and burning them to the bone. The man's screams joined the hellish chorus rising from the arena floor. Everywhere Leon looked, the true horror of the three orders unfolded in grotesque biblical detail. A Pharmacia rival's slow-acting curse took hold on an enemy warrior, causing his flesh to rot visibly in real time, skin sloughing away in wet, dripping sheets, while the victim clawed desperately at his own dissolving face and throat. Bolts of summoned lightning from a Mancy priest cooked another fighter alive inside his own armor, the metal glowing red as the stench of seared meat and hair thickened the air. Altering warriors sprouted extra grotesque appendages in desperate bids for advantage, only to have them hacked away in fountains of arterial blood, the mutations turning against their owners in the frenzy. The sand drank deeply of it all, growing darker, slicker, and more treacherous with every passing minute. Yet through it all, Leon's team held firm. Their coordination, forged in the rocky hills and olive groves of Tanaju and tempered during the perilous sea voyage westward, proved decisive amid the anarchy. Boreas's precise winds fanned Pyrrhon's flames into even greater roaring infernos that cleared paths through the press. Lysandros' subtle powders and illusions created openings for Stelios' devastating brute assaults and Leon's lightning aerial strikes. They fought not merely for personal glory or the throne, but with a deeper, shared purpose rooted in the Creator's vision of the island sinking beneath the waves. Obedience, not the hunger of Ra'av, drove them. One by one, rival teams were dismantled, bodies piled in grotesque heaps, the once pale sand turned into a dark, sticky mire. King Gorgothon rose partially from his throne, his petrified fist slamming down once in apparent approval or taunt. A localized tremor rippled outward across the arena floor, not the full devastating power he could unleash, but enough to knock several fighters off balance and split the sand in jagged lines. His amplified laughter boomed across the ring on unnatural winds. Witness the price of weakness and pride. The body fails exactly as the order of Guff foretold long ago. The spirit hungers as Ra'av promised. Only the obedient to the true covenants will rule. Leon's team pressed onward relentlessly. In the desperate final clashes of the opening cull, Leon soared high once more on his blue flame wings, the flames beating powerfully against the air. A massive aromancy opponent summoned a howling, cutting whirlwind that threatened to flay the flesh from his allies. Boreas met it head-on with his own controlled gusts, the two forces colliding in a screaming, sand-filled vortex that momentarily blinded half the arena. Leon dove straight through the heart of the chaos, wings tucked for speed, his flaming fist connecting with devastating force against the aromancer's chest. Blue fire exploded outward on impact, ribs shattered audibly. The man was hurled backward like a broken doll, body smoking and lifeless before it even struck the ground. The last of the opposing fighters crumpled or fled in vain. A profound ringing silence fell for a single heartbeat across the blood-soaked floor. Then the arena exploded into absolute pandemonium. Leon! Leon of Tanaju! The winged dog, Kion, reigns supreme. The chants merged into a single worshipful roar. Flower petals, copper coins, and even small trinkets rained down from the upper tiers in a storm of adulation. All 5 members of Leon's team still stood amid the carnage, bloodied, battered, and maimed, but miraculously alive. Stelios favored one heavily bruised leg, his bones creaking audibly with every shift of weight. Lysandros pressed a trembling hand to his temple, muttering fragmented arguments with unseen phantoms. Pyrrhon's arms and neck were blackened further, fresh cracks visible in the charred skin as he panted. Boreas coughed repeatedly into a rag now stained dark with blood flecks. Leon's side burned from the cauterized gash, and fresh glowing scars traced luminous paths further up both forearms like tributaries of forbidden fire. Kion receded reluctantly into the hidden dimensions, sated for the moment, but leaving behind whispers of greater victories and thrones yet to be claimed. The priest's amplified voice cut through the frenzy once more. The team from Tanaju advances intact. Survivors of the first culling may retire to lick their wounds and prepare. 1 full week is granted for healing before the next round of the bracket commences. Flesh has not yet failed you, warriors. Praise the Watchers. They limped as a unit from the blood-soaked sand toward the shadowed tunnels leading to the advancing team's barracks. The crowd's thunderous cheers chased them every step. From the luxury boxes, the Egyptian giants' mocking laughter thundered even louder, carrying clearly on the wind. The runt's pathetic spectacle has produced a new toy for our amusement, one giant roared, Sobek the flesh-eater, judging by the crocodile jaw audible in the voice. Blue flames and wings of fire. How long, I wonder, until the body betrays this dog as it betrays all covenant flesh? Leon ignored the taunts, focusing instead on the steadying warmth of the olive branch token against his skin. In the dim, torchlit tunnel, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. The remnant ally's words echoed again in his mind. A small but fierce spark of hope kindled in his chest amid the suffocating spiritual darkness of the 10 rings. The barracks chamber assigned to them was Spartan yet reinforced. Thick stone walls strengthened by geomancy, simple cots stained from the blood of previous occupants, a central brazier, and a small alcove for basic ablutions. Lysandros immediately set to work with his satchel, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the tremors in his fingers and the occasional distracted mutter. Hold still, Stelios. Those ribs are cracked deep beneath the bronze hardening. The invocation saved your life today, but the added weight pulls harder on your frame with every use. I have a salve to ease the brittleness temporarily. He mixed drafts for Boreas's poisoned lungs and applied cooling, herb-infused poultices to Pyrrhon's worsening burns, the charring now cracking and weeping in places. Stelios grunted in pain but offered a loyal, gruff smile toward Leon. "We held the line together, brother, just as the Creator commanded through your vision. I will tank 1,000 more blows if it serves his will. My bones may grow heavy, but my heart remains steadfast." Pyrrhon flexed his damaged arms gingerly, his grin still fierce and competitive despite the obvious agony. "Did you see the fear in their eyes when your wings unfurled above the sand, Leon? The crowd chanted your name, Chion's champion. We will burn through every round of this cursed tournament and drown the whole island as commanded. Let them cheer while they can." Boreas nodded quietly from his cot, a gentle but pained breeze stirring the stagnant air of the chamber. "The very winds here carry the taint of corruption. I will command them as long as my breath holds. The judgment you saw in the dream guides us all." Leon lowered himself onto a cot, the blue flames now fully extinguished, but the fresh scars still glowing with faint, inner light in the dimness. His entire body ached with the deep, unnatural weariness that came only from true altering invocation. The power had brought victory, but the temptation lingered at the edges of his mind like a shadow that refused to dissipate. Next round will demand more, pup. Greater power, the throne of Ring. 7 calls your name. He closed his eyes, the vision from the Creator rising unbidden. The 10 rings cracking, the sea rising in judgment, the command to cast the sinful city down. "We fight with discipline and unity," he said aloud, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "We survive together for as long as the Creator permits, and we remember always the true purpose that brought us across the great green. Not glory, not thrones, obedience." Outside the thick stone walls, the depravity of Atlantis continued unabated, even as night fell. Distant screams echoed from sacrificial altars, where innocent blood fed biomancy and necromancy rituals in the deeper rings. Vapors from Pharmacia academies drifted on the night breeze, carrying whispers and hallucinations to the unwary. In the central palace of the innermost ring, Poseidon and his favored son Thalorion doubtless reviewed reports of the day's cull over feasts of wine and forbidden meats. The entire island pulsed with corruption, gold and marble facades veiling rot, power, and spiritual hunger. Yet within the barracks, the 5 men from Tanaju shared a simple, quiet meal of barley bread, dried figs, and water. Leon led them in humble prayer, reciting ancient songs and promises from the line of Seth that the remnant still preserved in secret. The faithful endured, even in the heart of darkness. Perhaps during the coming week of healing, another contact from the hidden remnant would reach them with guidance or aid. 1 week to mend broken bodies, restore strength, and steel their souls against what lay ahead. The second round would bring greater tests, and as the divine outline foretold, the first losses among them. Leon felt the spiritual weight settle heavier upon his shoulders. His once clean arms now bore the first permanent luminous scars of covenant power. The body failed just as the ancient prophecies and the Watchers themselves had warned. But true power, the power of obedience to the Creator, endured. As the torches burned low and his companions drifted into uneasy sleep, Leon stood alone at the narrow window, slit overlooking the darkened arena. The blue glow from his scars softly illuminated the olive branch token held in his palm. Far below, the sand lay dark and thirsty, waiting for more blood. King Gorgothon's empty throne loomed in the distance like a sentinel of coming trials. "Strengthen us through the healing days ahead, Creator," Leon prayed, voice barely a whisper. "Let not the mockery of the false gods from Egypt or the temptations of Chion prevail. The flood draws near. Mercy remains for the obedient. Judgment comes. The distant, fading echoes of the Egyptian giant's laughter still carried faintly on the night wind, but they no longer pierced his spirit as deeply. He had tasted the fullness of Chion's gifts before 30,000 witnesses and chosen the narrow path of divine obedience. The fall of Atlantis had truly begun, not with trumpets, armies, or spectacle, but with 5 faithful men carrying an olive branch and an unyielding command into the very heart of corruption and blood. All flesh is grass, the grass withers, but the word of the Creator endures forever. This has been an unabridged audio production of Before the Flood, The Fall of Atlantis, Chapter 6, Blood and Blue Flame, by Matson. All rights reserved by Matson, LLC. Copyright Matson, LLC 2026. If you enjoyed this production, please like, share, and subscribe. Available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow the author at Matson for updates. Links in the description.